Hello everyone, this is Matt Cipriani from Group 3. Today I'll be speaking about the basics of copyright. We will be touching on the standards and objectives of this lesson, along with defining and discussing what is copyright, why is it important for you as students to know what copyright is, copyright rules, the repercussions of violating those rules, a takeaway, and finally, we will wrap things up with a quick assignment. So let's go ahead and get started. So what is copyright? Copyright is defined by the United States Copyright Office as a form of protection provided by the laws of the United States for original works of authorship, including literacy, dramatic, musical, architectural, cartographic, choreographic, pantomimic, pictorial, graphic, sculptural, and audiovisual creations. Copyright literally means the right to copy, but has come to mean that body of exclusive rights granted by law to copyright owners for protection of their work. Copyright protection does not extend to any idea, procedure, process, system, title, principle, or discovery. Similarly, names, titles, short phrases, slogans, familiar symbols, mere variations of typographic ornamentation, lettering, coloring, and listings of contents or ingredients are not subject to copyright. So let's break this down a little bit. In other words, works created by writers, musicians, artists, and producers are protected by the law. You have to ask for permissions, and sometimes you have to ask them in writing to use things created by other people or by those people. Works of art, poems, novels, short stories, photographs, and songs are all examples of things that people can create. So who cares about copyright? Well, let's say you wrote a song and published it on your Instagram. Then, 8 months later, you hear your song on Ellen, sung by Taylor Swift. Does that seem fair to you? Turn and talk with your neighbor for a second. Of course not. It does not seem fair. Where's the motivation to write songs or create art if someone else can easily steal it and take credit for it? The motivation is called the Copyright Act of 1976. And the Copyright Act of 1976 states, for the most part, those who violate the Copyright Act of 1976 can be fined and face possible prison time. The law will protect you and your original piece of work, and that's the basic gist of the Copyright Act of 1976, along with the definition that we spoke of before. So, benefits of copyright. Copyright exists immediately and automatically when the work is created, that is, when it is fixed in a tangible copy for the first time. The benefits of knowing what copyright is, what it is used for, the standards and the rules as students are, the completion of research papers using copyrighted material without being in violation of the law, following campus and district internet policies, which include copyright protections and rules, appropriately cite material used in research papers and projects to give credit to authors and or creators. So let's talk a little bit about copyright rules. There are a few exceptions to copyright rules. These exceptions include fair use, joint owners, and works made for hire. So commissioned work. So let's talk a little bit about this. Fair use. So the fair use allows for limited copying of copyrighted works for educational and research purposes. Under fair use, reproduction for purposes such as criticism, news reporting, teaching, including multiple copies for classroom use, scholarship, or research, is not an infringement of copyrights. So that's fair use. So joint owners, when two or more people create a work together, each of them is an author. They are called joint authors, and the work is called a joint work. So joint authors are co-owners of the copyright in the work, unless they agree otherwise. And works made for hire, or commissioned work. Excuse me. Works made for hire, work made for hire by an employee in certain kinds of commissioned works, are considered to be authored by the employer or the commissioning party. So, if your boss asks you to write a report as part of your job, the company you work for gets all the copyright protection that would otherwise have been available to you. So that's briefly going over some of the copyright rules. So some copyright repercussions. So fines range from $750 to $30,000 per copyright infringement. If the copyright infringement can be proven that the perpetrator willfully knew of the violation, the fines can actually be raised to up to $150,000. If a copyright violator uses the infringement for private or commercial gain, then the fines can reach up to $250,000, and the perpetrator can receive up to 5 years in prison. So this is basically, for the most part, a major reason why you should never, ever willfully and knowingly take somebody's work and use it for yourself, or say that you created it. The repercussions are major, and even though it seems like it might not be, they can really affect your life financially or going to prison, and that will affect your life moving forward with gaining jobs and employment, getting tuition scholarships and financial aid, and so many other parts. So basically the gist of it is, just don't do it. So let's move on. So how long does a copyright last? So this is a great question, because if you copyright a work, does that mean that the copyright and your rights under that last forever? Absolutely not. So copyrights do not last forever, but they do last a pretty long time. Under the current laws, copyright protection starts from the moment of creation of the work and continues until 70 years after the death of the author or artist. Once a copyright has expired, it becomes public domain. And so just to touch a little bit on public domain, when a copyright has expired and it becomes public domain, that means that your rights to use it basically open up pretty wide, and anybody can use that work or that song or that poem, so on and so forth, without having to worry about copyright infringement or asking anything of the author or the creator for the use of that. So I'd like you all to know that there are standards created by the American Library Association, also known as the ALA, for all librarians serving their patrons to adhere to. We as librarians are to follow these standards for your benefit. So let's take a look at a few. So Standard 3, Principle 2A, and this is from the ALA, again, the American Library Association. The librarian models and promotes the highest standard of conduct, ethics, and integrity in the use of the web and other print and electronic resources. In the following program development stages, the librarian, A, complies with and leads staff and students to comply with current school board policies, legislation, regulations regarding access, copyright, plagiarism, selection and reconsideration of materials, and other legal issues that affect the library and media program. So Standard 3, Principle 2E provides integrated training for students and staff in campus and district internet policies, the principles of copyright, plagiarism, intellectual freedom, confidentiality, the rights of users, and other intellectual property concerns. So, let's just briefly take a look at the standards for students. So we briefly took a look at the standards librarians adhere to concerning copyright. Here's one that you as students would adhere to. So, for example, standard 110.62, journalism B.1.B. B, knowledge and skills, going into 1. The student demonstrates an understanding of media development, press law, and responsibility. The student is expected to identify the foundations of press law, including copyright law, the fair use exemption, and the ownership of intellectual property. All things we've gone through. So, if you're interested to learn more about the copyright process, the rules, repercussions, and so on and so forth, here are a few additional resources that you could take a look at. And if you ever have any questions about copyright and this presentation, or any of the things that you might be questioning when you're looking at writing a paper, citing it correctly, using certain things for, excuse me, a presentation, or even for your teacher here using things in the classroom, you could always come to the library and ask us for any help. So that will be it for the day. Again, remember, you come and ask us for any help, any questions that you have regarding copyright, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.